Okay, well, it is 10 o'clock, so I think we can get started. Thank you, everybody, for being here again today for our part two in our webinar series. Hopefully, where you are, you have power. I know most of the state obviously has some heavy rain right now, so we'll keep our fingers crossed we'll have no bad flooding, which is ironic because we're going to be talking about flooding and new flood maps today, right? But that is great. If you're able to in the chat, if you want to just type in what community you're from or organization, just so we can kind of get an idea of who's here today, that would be great as well. But for those who don't know who I am, maybe you weren't able to join last week or we've never interacted before. My name is Katie Pate. I'm the State Floodplain Management Program Coordinator within the New Hampshire Office of Planning and Development. I do work with the New Hampshire Floodplain Management Program, and we are within the larger state agency of the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs, and we are the state coordinating agency of the National Flood Insurance Program in New Hampshire as well. So this webinar, again, this is the second in our two-part series titled Flood Maps Are Changing. And today we're going to cover tools that are available to prepare your residents and business owners for when those new maps become effective. Again, this webinar is intended for community officials of those communities in Grafton County who have received updated flood maps as part of FEMA's mapping project for the Pemigewasset River watershed. So again, this is a two-part webinar series. Today's webinar is the second, and we'll cover preparing your communities and residents and business owners as well. So just with the first webinar, this webinar will have two offerings. So the webinar presented right now at 10 a.m. is going to be the same exact webinar presented tonight at 6. We just had the multiple offerings to allow anyone who had conflicts or wasn't able to attend one or the other to able to get this information as well. Also of note, again, we will be hosting a National Flood Insurance Program NFIP basics training for New Hampshire community officials in early 2024. This date has not been announced, but we will be sending an email out and putting it on our website when that is planned. It will be virtual as well and recorded at that time. We do have a past recording from last June on our website linked through our YouTube page if that's something you're interested in or you don't want to wait until that training in early 2024 to get that information. So let's begin by covering some housekeeping items for this webinar before we get started. So again, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube page afterwards. All attendees are muted with their cameras and microphones turned off. Again, there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this webinar. I don't expect this webinar to take the full hour and a half, just like last week. So we have plenty of time for any questions there may be. As we go along, if you have questions that pop in your mind or that come up, feel free to put those in the chat or jot them down yourself. Once we get to that Q&A section at the end, anybody will be able to raise their hand and we'll be able to turn that microphone on for you, so you'll be able to ask your question verbally if you prefer. If you do have any technical issues throughout this webinar, hopefully you're on here, so you've made it this far compared to last week where we had more technical issues. But if you do have any technical issues, please email planning@livefree.nh.gov. Elvina from our office, who's also on this call, will be monitoring that email to help give you that immediate assistance. If you are able to get in the chat but having a technical assistant, you can put your questions there and she can help you out as well. So with that, here is our agenda for this morning. So we're going to begin with a recap of our first webinar in the series from last week, which covered what those new flood maps mean for your community. From there, we'll discuss what your community's residents and business owners need to know about the new maps, including what actions they should be taking now before those maps become effective. From there, we'll go into detail about our outreach toolkit for community officials that's available right now on our website. We'll also provide an overview of the different map viewer products that are available, as there are quite a few. As well, I'll do a little demo. I'll share my screen on that and go through that as well. And again, there'll be plenty of time at the end for any Q&A. So let's begin with a quick recap of our first webinar from last week, which is what the new maps mean for your community. So as a recap, again, the new maps are becoming effective for communities in Grafton County as part of the Pemigewasset River watershed on February 8th, 2024. FEMA is the entity that publishes and updates the flood insurance rate maps, or those firms, and the flood insurance study reports, or FIS reports, and through a process called Risk Map, MAP being all capital, MAP standing for Mapping, Assessment, and Planning. This is a multi-step process that has been in the works for several years leading up to this point of the new updated maps. As part of this process, FEMA updates the maps at the watershed level and then releases them at the county level. So in this particular instance, these maps were created as part of the Pemigewasset River watershed, but have been released for only those communities within the watershed that are also located in Grafton County. So for example, communities in Belknap County who are also part of the Pemigewasset River watershed have not received the new maps at this point. So this risk map project included 30 communities in Grafton County, as noted on the slide here. The communities noted with an asterisk are the communities that do not have any new special flood hazard areas. Special flood hazard area is also SFHA, so you'll kind of hear those two terms intermingly. And so those communities, again, with the asterisks do not have any special flood hazard areas, where all the other communities do have new special flood hazard areas within their community on the new maps, or a portion of their community within the new maps. As I noted before, this project was completed at the watershed level. And for that reason, there are many communities in this project area that only have a portion of their community receiving new maps. But then again, that being said, there are communities here that do have their whole community receiving new maps. So it just depends where in the watershed your community is located. So for some map panels, the floodplain boundaries may be different on these new maps than what was in the previous effective maps. The reason for that is that in the studies that were completed in the development of these new flood insurance rate maps, those studies included practices such as updated hydraulic and hydrologic analysis, new topographic and aerial imagery was used. Any new or modified bridges, culverts, or dams that are in your floodplain may have impacted how that flooding may occur if that event were to happen. Additionally, stream channels may have changed, and new approximate A-zones models were utilized in these studies. So with this new risk map project, there are two types of products that will be provided, the regulatory and non-regulatory products. The regulatory products include the flood insurance rate maps, again, those firms, the flood insurance study reports, those FIS reports, and then the firm database. That firm database, you don't hear about it too much, but that's all the information and data that's included in the firms and the FIS reports, but just in GIS format as well. So just be aware that that's available if that's applicable to you. Non-regulatory products are available. Those products supplement the flood hazard information that's produced by the regulatory products. These non-regulatory products include surface elevation grids and flood depth grids as well. These are intended to be used for deeper analysis of flood risk, including the ability to view and visualize local flood risk. It allows communities to make informed decisions about reducing flood loss, and it also allows communities to mitigate potential damage from any flood hazards that may occur. So when these new maps become effective in February, these maps may supersede any letters of map changes that were previously issued. Letters of map change include any letter of map amendments, so LOMAs, and any letters of map revisions or LOMARs. So there are kind of three, in my mind, there are three general categories of what happens when those letters of map changes are superseded. So the first of those three categories is that those letter of map change is validated. So there's no change with these new flood insurance rate maps that are going to become effective. So if there was a letter of map amendment, a LOMA previously issued for a property on the maps, that property will be shown out of the floodplains on the new map. So it's just taking that LOMA directly into account. But it's not going to say LOMA anymore. It's just part of the new maps. The second option, what can happen with those letters of map change, is that letter of map change is superseded, meaning that letter of map change will be void. So if a property previously had a LOMA issued, that LOMA now may be superseded based on that map study analysis, and their property may actually be back into the floodplain on these new maps. So even though they had a LOMA before, the new maps are putting them back in the floodplain, and that previous LOMA is now void, meaning it's no longer valid. And then finally, kind of the third category or bucket that this could fall into is that some properties will need to be redetermined. This typically happens when there's multiple lots involved and a new letter of map amendment may need to be applied for. So when that letter of final determination, that 6-month compliance period that issued when these new maps will go effective, each community should have also received what's called a summary of map action. It's called a SOMA document. Within each letter, it details what has happened to each of the letter of map changes previously issued for the community. I did receive copies of most of these summary of map actions, so I have a copy of those. If you don't have that in your community, you're not aware of it. I know there was quite a few communities that reached out after the previous webinar last week asking for that summary of map action, and I was able to provide that for them. So if you're still a community and you don't know if you have the summary map action, please reach out to me and I'm more than happy to send that to you so you're aware of what's going on with all the different letter of map changes that were previously issued in your community. So when FEMA updates a community's flood insurance rate map and flood insurance study report with newer revised flood hazard information, each community must update its floodplain management regulations to reference the date of that new firm and fish report prior to the effective date of those updated maps. Additionally, any other changes to the community's ordinance, if needed, must also be completed by that effective date in order to remain in good standing in the NFIP. In regard to the use of new map data prior to the effective date, communities are not required to use the new maps for floodplain development requirements prior to that date, meaning prior to that February 8th, 2024. FEMA does encourage, though, communities to reasonably utilize this information, specifically if there's instances where maybe the base flood elevation, that BFE, has increased. If there's changes in floodway boundaries, that would be a good opportunity to utilize this data before then, just to ensure that the health, safety, and property of your citizens is protected as well. So for properties with a federally backed mortgage or a loan, and if they're located in a high-risk flood zone, they are required to have flood insurance, for the life of their mortgage. So for properties that are newly mapped into that special flood hazard area and they have a federally backed mortgage, they should be receiving a letter indicating this from their lender that that flood insurance is going to be required for the remaining life of their mortgage. The NFIP does offer a low-cost insurance option known as the newly mapped procedure. So under this procedure, newly mapped customers, so they can receive discounts, which would be applied to their insurance policy, and which would then gradually increase within that existing statutory limit set by Congress up until that full risk premium was reached. And even if a building is sold afterwards, that policy can be transferred to the new owner, allowing them to keep that lower cost rate as well. Okay, so that was our recap of the first webinar. Now let's move on to our topic for this webinar, which is talking about what your residents and business owners need to know as the new maps become effective. So to begin, I would say that one of the most important things with these new maps becoming effective is getting the word out and letting all of your property owners and businesses aware of the changes in your floodplain. So in regards to getting the word out, both FEMA and the New Hampshire Floodplain Management Program, that's our office, are performing outreach to both community officials and the general public. So this webinar is one example of the outreach we are performing to community officials. Again, thank you for being here. As far as the public outreach goes, our office, again, the New Hampshire Floodplain Management Program, we have information on our website as well as including information in our different media and trainings. I know FEMA is also planning to host an open house for community officials and property owners regarding the new maps with insurance and mapping specialists there to answer any questions there may be. While this date has not been scheduled, I do believe they are looking to hold this in January, and I also believe this will be an in-person event, not virtual as well. But all that being said, it's really the community officials who are highly encouraged to perform this outreach to your residents and your businesses. As the officials for your community, you are the ones that know your community best. Your residents, they listen and they trust you. Your residents are also already used to receiving information from you versus receiving it from another entity, being us or being FEMA. Additionally, your floodplain regulations are administered and enforced at the local level. So it's up to the community to ensure any development in the floodplain follows your regulations and then the building requirements within as well. So over the next few slides, we're going to go over 5 different things that I think are really important for your residents and business owners to know about the new upcoming maps. So the first need to know number 1 item that your residents and business owners should be aware of is that these updated maps include that that the flood hazard zones and the elevations on these upcoming maps may be changing. So these new maps will become effective on February 8th, 2024, and those flood zones and base flood elevations may be different than what was on the previous effective maps. My number 2 need to know for residents and business owners is that the map changes will impact flood insurance requirements in some places. So again, as I mentioned previously, flood insurance is a requirement as a condition of any federally backed mortgage in those high-risk areas. Again, those high-risk areas are designated on the flood maps as zones starting with the letters A and V. In Grafton County, there's only letters A. So we talked about this quite a bit in more depth of the last webinar, so I'd recommend to go rewatch that again if you want to learn more or if you missed it as well. Now, there may be a certain properties in your community that have been newly mapped into the high-risk flood zone, and now they are required flood insurance as a condition of their mortgage versus they may not have been before. And just similarity, there may be properties that were previously in that high-risk flood zone, and now they're mapped outside of that high-risk flood zone, and they're no longer required flood insurance as a condition of their mortgage. So it's just really important for all your residents to understand how their flood risk is changing so that they have time to make any changes prior to those new maps becoming effective. Again, FEMA has a great brochure called Map Changes and Flood Insurance, what property owners need to know. I know I mentioned this in the previous webinar, but I'd highly recommend utilizing this brochure as you do any outreach that you may do, as it can be really helpful to explain those changes and what's happening to your residents. And I'll be sure to put this, I can put a link in the chat, but I know I also will send it out and follow up to this meeting as well. Did I go too far? Okay, sorry, I switched slides there. Okay, so then my third need to know item, number 3, that your residents and business owners should know is that there may be ways to save on some flood insurance costs, but the options may be time sensitive. So for example, again, that newly mapped discounts are available for those moving into the high-risk flood zones. Under this discount, again, that policyholder would receive a discount that would then gradually increase over time until that full premium was reached. Again, anybody that I talk to, same thing within your community, if you talk to your residents, I'd highly recommend that they reach out and speak to their insurance professional as soon as possible just to see what discounts are available to them that can be applied. And if anybody's on here who's new to flood insurance in general, flood insurance can be purchased through the NFIP, either through the NFIP directly at floodsmart.gov, or it's also can be purchased through most insurance providers as well. Okay. Now, number 4 out of 5 of the things that residents and business owners should know about the updated maps is that flood insurance is highly recommended, even if it isn't required for your property. So for properties that are either no longer mapped in the high-risk flood zones, or maybe they've never been mapped in the high-risk flood zones, it's still important to let those property owners know that flood insurance is available, even though their property isn't located in that area. As it's a message that we quite frequently give out to communities, your risk is reduced but not removed by being in those flood zones that are low risk. And then finally, the last thing that I would say it's important for your residents and business owners to know about the updated maps is that those new maps also impact where your community's floodplain development regulations apply. So for all communities that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, you have adopted floodplain management regulations that apply to all areas designated as flood insurance, special flood hazard areas on FEMA's flood insurance rate maps. So as these maps are changing, that means the properties that fall under your floodplain management regulations may also be changing. In some areas, they may not change, but in some areas they may. So there may be properties that did not have to meet these regulations before that now do. So again, it's just really important to ensure that these properties are aware of those community requirements that now apply to their property where they might not have before. So what action should your residents and business owners take? Well, I would say my first recommendation would be for them to determine which flood zone they are located in. Are they located in a special flood hazard area? Does their flood zone start with the letter A, or are they in zone X, where that's a low risk flood hazard area? I would also recommend that they reach out again to their insurance provider to learn more about flood insurance and any options available to them. Traditionally, homeowners insurance does not cover flooding, so they may want to purchase flood insurance again, even if they're not required to by a condition of their mortgage. A great resource to learn more about flood insurance is floodsmart.gov. If anybody, a resident, property owner, business, has questions about the maps, they can also contact FEMA's Mapping and Insurance Exchange for additional information. That phone number and email are on the slide here, and I'll also share that afterwards as well. And then finally, I would recommend that if that resident, that property owner, that business owner is located in a flood zone in that special flood hazard area, that they review their community's floodplain regulations to determine how their property is impacted. This would depend on which zone they are in and what regulations your community has adopted, but just know how those regulations affect their property. Okay, so now let's take a little deeper dive at our outreach toolkit that we have available for community officials to use in your outreach. So again, our office has released an outreach toolkit for community officials that's available on our website. It's on our current New Hampshire floodplain mapping activities webpage. Yes, that is a mouthful, but it is the name of the webpage. I included the link on this slide, but you can also access it or find it by going to our website at just www.nhopd.com. So this outreach toolkit is a set of customizable materials designed for yourself, community officials, to communicate with your residents and businesses about the updated maps. There's quite a bit of different information and templates available in that toolkit. So feel free to mix and match whichever materials you'd like to use. Again, feel free to customize them with your own logos or any information specific to your community. So as far as conducting outreach, I think it's first important to consider what the different types of outreach that your community may choose to undertake. So the first would be like general outreach. And so these would be messaging that would go out to the entire community. So for example, this could be posting information on your community's webpage, posting information on your community social media accounts. You could provide a mailing to all residents, or you could add something into a tax bill, or if you have any other mailings that are going out, to all property owners with the end of the year or early in the new year next year. You could also include a press release in a local newspaper or any other highly read publication in the area as well. Additionally, the opposite of general outreach is you could provide targeted outreach. So this could be messages or messaging that goes out to certain groups of people in your community. So for example, sending letters to property owners that are now located in a special flood hazard area on the updated maps. This could be letters to property owners that are now being affected by a superseded letter of map change. You could also provide a presentation to a community group, such as a local committee or a board or any active group in your community as well. So within the toolkit itself, we have many templates available. So for templates, we have a website content document that has language that could be posted on a homepage or a separate page of your community's website. We have social media posts of different information of varying lengths, depending on what platform your community utilizes. We included a sample press release that could be put in any local newspaper or again, any other type of publication that's highly read in your community. We have a sample postcard or bill insert that could be put into a tax bill that may be going out, or again, any other mailing you may have early in the new year or the end of this year. You could also print and cut these postcard size items and put them in the town hall, maybe at like the town clerk's desk or anywhere receiving high flow of traffic. Also other areas in town, if you have like a general store, if you have a meeting space, you have a community center, you have a post office, anywhere that gets that high number of residents kind of moving in and out. We also develop talking points for community officials. So if you're doing a presentation or speaking about the updated maps, you have some points to refer to. We've included interview tips in case you are contacted by any media to do an interview related to these updated maps as well. Excuse me. We also have some sample letters to property owners that we drafted for you guys. So this could be used to send to properties now in the special flood hazard area or property owners that received a different letter of map change. We also included a customizable PowerPoint presentation that can be utilized again in any targeted outreach to a local board, group, or other committee in your community. And then finally, for other resources, we did put together a folder with a bunch of different social media templates that could be used in either social media post or on your website or within a letter or within a posting, whatever that may be. And I also included 2 publication links that I think could be extremely helpful. The first is the one that I feel like I've mentioned 100 times in these webinars, which is FEMA's map changes in flood insurance, what property owners need to know. And then also I included FEMA's understanding the summary of map actions and revalidation letters, which is a great resource for guidance to any property owners who previously had a letter of map change for their property. So what type of outreach should you do? I think that's really is specific to each community. So there are many factors to consider, such as the time and resources that you have available. And also, what are your community's preferences? How do you typically reach out to your residents? Do you typically reach out through websites, social media, announcements in the newspaper? Is there anything that's worked really well in the past that you could maybe recreate or use that technique again? Maybe you can coordinate on a joint outreach effort with a neighboring community or any regional events as well, would be a good opportunity to help get this word out. Obviously, for most communities, we have town meeting coming up, excuse me. And even though that's past the effective date of these maps, it may still be a good opportunity to just provide some information on the new maps that are effective in your community. So there's a couple of items in the toolkit that I wanted to go a little bit into more detail on, as I think they could be really helpful in certain situations. So the first item here is our sample letter to property owners that are in those special flood hazard areas. Again, this letter is suitable for all property owners that are now located in that special flood hazard area, whether they've always been mapped on the previous map in the special flood hazard area, or if they're newly mapped into the special flood hazard area. Again, this letter is just a tool that can target those specific areas of your community, especially in areas that have experienced a significant change in the special flood hazard area. This might be helpful. This would also be a really good opportunity to notify those properties of your community's floodplain regulations that will now apply to their property as of February 8th of next year. And then the next toolkit item that I really wanted to highlight is the letter to property owners that may have received a superseded letter of map change. So again, when the new maps were updated, all letters of map change, including those letters of map amendments, were revalidated based on the changes to flood zones and the associated base flood elevations. That summary of map actions letter that each community should have received from FEMA does show the results of this evaluation. And that can be a good helpful tool to target which properties to send this letter to. So again, with that summary of map action, that letter that community officials got, there's 2 categories that are worth noting within that letter. That first is what's called category number 2, which indicates the letters of map change that will remain valid and are included on the new firms. And then the second category worth noting is called category 3, which is indicating which letters of map changes are superseded and will not remain valid on those new firms. So this specific template that we have developed is intended for those properties that were superseded, basically informing them that their property must now follow the community's floodplain development regulations as well, versus they previously, they were amended from that, but now with these new maps, they're back in that floodplain and those regulations apply. Again, for any insurance requirements, their lender, if they have one, would reach out to that property separately to provide them. It's not up to the community to inform them of their insurance requirements. That would be their lender if they have one that would let them know that. So now let's talk about when this outreach should be performed. And so my first gut answer is that the sooner the better. So the more time that people have to learn what their flood zone change is, it then gives them more time to take action and consider their options before the maps go effective. So things the community should think about is to consider, again, what methods would reach the most people. Again, those general messaging can maybe those take less effort than others and reaches a larger audience. And again, once those maps become effective, you don't have to stop your outreach either. Even after February 8th, it's be still good to continue to get that information out of, these new maps have become effective in town. These are the properties that are affected. If your property is newly mapped, you now have to meet our community's floodplain regulations. Those are examples of messaging that can continue even after the effective date. So now I'm actually going to do a demo of the different map viewer products as well. So these different map viewer products that we're going to go over is the FEMA's pending versus effective map viewer, FEMA's flood map changes viewer, and then FEMA's map service center. And then I'll also pull up our website to show you our outreach toolkit and where you can find that. So at this point, I'm actually going to stop sharing my PowerPoint and I'm going to share my other screen. Let's hope it all works, because as everybody knows, as soon as you start to share something else, when it doesn't work, when all the eyes are on you, right? So my first thing I wanted to show everybody was FEMA's Region 1 pending versus effective National Flood Hazard Viewer tool. Again, I'll send the link out to this. So this is how the tool works. On the left side, well, first I should back up. I should say, you have this bar here that can be dragged and dropped. The left side is the current effective maps. And on the right side would be any pending map. So as you can see, as you drag and drop, you can see here's the pending maps here for Grafton County versus here's all the effective maps available for the region. The region just being the FEMA's Northeast region. So as an example, you can type in any address. I'm going to type in Warren, New Hampshire, just as an example. You'll see it zooms in. If you have a specific address, you could type that all in here, but I'm not going to do any specifics in this demonstration. So again, on the left-hand side, you'll see these are all the effective maps that are currently in place. These were the effective maps of February 20th, 2008. And everything on the right is what will become effective in February. So as you can drag and drop, or not, excuse me, as you just drag across the screen, you can really see what changes are specifically happening to certain areas in your community. So for example, right here, you'll see there's no special flood hazard area right here. This orange is the 500-year flood. So there's a little bit showing. But as you kind of drag this across in the pending maps, for example, this is where that special flood hazard area has increased. Another good example is in Plymouth, New Hampshire, and Holderness as well. Zoom in a little bit. So again, the left side of the screen would be your current effective map. So this is what was adopted in 2008. And everything on this side of the screen would be the new maps going effective in 2024. So as you drag this across, you can see, at least in this particular instance, there are some significant changes. This floodway is growing quite a bit compared to what it was previously, where you had zone AE. Now you'll see that floodway has changed. So it's just a really good tool to kind of compare exactly how maybe specific properties are being affected by the new maps. So that's the pending versus effective tool. The next tool I wanted to look at is FEMA's flood map changes viewer. So in the flood map changes viewer, this is where you can see the effective maps, any preliminary maps, any pending maps being the ones with the effective date. So that's what's in place for Grafton County right now. And then also there's a layer called changes since the last firm that you can also view. So again, I'm just going to close out of this. You can type in an address. Let's do Plymouth again. We'll zoom in. So the way this works, it can be kind of, there's a lot when it first comes in here. Hoping it's going to load correctly. Here we go. Okay, now it's just load. So over here in the right-hand corner, there's two buttons. This is going to be your legend that tells you basically what you're looking at. And then on the right hand, this one that I believe it has a name. I always call it the hamburger or the stack of papers, personally. You'll see these are the different layers that you can click on and off. So going through coastal barrier resource system, this isn't coastal, so we can click that off because there's no data for that. You have the national flood hazard layer. That is the current effective maps. This effective firm panels, that is just the label of what firm panel number it is on the current effective maps. the preliminary national flood. So those are any preliminary maps that are available. Again, in Grafton County here, the maps are no longer preliminary. They have moved to that pending phase, so we can click that off. You have the pending map viewer, so this is what's pending that will become effective. And then you have this layer here that can be really helpful called that preliminary changes since last firm layer, excuse me. So this is going to demonstrate, and you can use the legend here to see how that special flood hazard area is changing in your community. And again, you can click this on and off, so you could look at just the pending layer of how that looks. You could look at just the effective layer. Or again, you could look at that preliminary changes layer to see how it's changing. So as you can see here, I believe this is Holderness. I think the town line with Plymouth goes right through the middle of the PEMI there. So you can see like here that kind of, it's yellowy green on my screen. I know every monitor makes it looks differently. That is actually like floodway increase here versus this is floodway decrease. The solid yellowy green is special flood hazard area increase versus this is special flood hazard area decrease. So it's just another tool to view all the different layers at once or separately for however it benefits that moment, what you're looking at. The next demo I wanted to give is FEMA's Map Service Center. This is kind of your one-stop shop for anything that you may be looking for. So if you're looking for a current effective map for a certain address, you could just type in the address here and have that load. But I'd also recommend the Search All Products or the MSC Search All Products here. I did touch on this in the last webinar, but I'm just going to walk you guys through it now. So for example, you would choose your state. We're going to choose New Hampshire County. Once it loads, we're going to choose Grafton County. And then let's just choose Alexandria because it's the first one. This is where you have to make sure you hit the search button. Again, I cannot tell you how many times I've got to this point and I'm waiting for it to load, or I've hit the enter button on my keyboard because I didn't hit the actual blue search button here. That just takes a few minutes to load. And here you'll see your results. So you have these different folders that you can select. So you have the effective products. So these would be everything where you can view and download your firms. This would be from 2008, your fish report. And then this other data here, any letters of map change. Then also this would be where you would download that GIS data as well. And then when we close out your preliminary products, looks like there's only 2 panels because once the maps had that effective date, they moved from preliminary to pending. There's not too many pending in Alexandria right now. And then you have your pending products. So this is where you can view and download all those different flood insurance rate maps that are becoming effective. You can download and view those flood insurance study reports becoming effective. And then that firm database, again, is that GIS information if you needed that. And then just historic products. These are, again, the maps that were effective prior to the current map. So let's see, we have dates of 1998, 1979, 1979, 1998, 1974, 1977. So just if you ever needed to look back at historic information, just know that is available here as well. And then just the last thing I was going to show was how to access our toolkit. So you can go to newhampshireopd.com. That brings you to our Office of Planning and Development website. You can go to our floodplain management program under what we do. From there, you can either click through here under news and updates, but you can also go to our mapping page, which I think is buried. So I would recommend going through here. And then once you're on our current New Hampshire floodplain mapping activities, once you scroll all the way to the bottom, I know it's a lot, you kind of have to come down here. You'll see here are the two toolkits. They're both zip files. One is for communities with preliminary map, and then we have one for pending map. So pending maps would apply to Grafton County here. So you can download this and it will have all those template documents, files available to use however you wish. So that is all I have. I'm going to stop sharing. I can actually share my PowerPoint again. Just as we get to the Q&A, just to make sure. You give me 1 second to get that back up. And we'll go all the way back to the Q&A section. Okay, so do we have any questions about all the information we talked about today? Any of the demos that we went through? Any other questions you have maybe about your new maps going effective? I'm happy to answer any of those now. You can put those in the chat feature as well, or if you want to raise your hand, we can allow you to unmute yourself and you can ask that verbally if that's easier.
Katie, while we're waiting, I have one question, just organization.
Absolutely.
We are going to send out a recording of this webinar, and would you send out links to
Yes.
various things you mentioned? Okay, thank you.
Yes. We'll send out links. I'll send a follow up with the recording, with all the documents we talked about, the link to the outreach toolkit, the link to those 2 FEMA publications that I keep mentioning. And of course, if you ever have a question or you can't find something, please reach out to our office. You know, I don't want you to feel like we're unapproachable or you're kind of alone in this. Like, please reach out to us and we can provide any information that we can to help make it easier for you. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions as of now.
No, me neither.
Okay,
Nothing in the chat.
Yep. Well, we'll sit on here for a few minutes in case anybody has any questions. But if you don't have any questions, again, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking your time out to be here, and I hope you all have happy holidays and hopefully no flooding in your community as we get our rain today. And I'll talk to you all in the new year.
Oh, somebody's typing in a question. And Margaret just said, thank you.
I'm glad it was great information and hopefully it's helpful.
If it's easier for people, I can just unmute everybody and you can ask your question. Okay, so it's from Donna. Can you go step by step on how to get the amendment adopted without going to town meeting?
Yes. So I don't have the exact RSA pulled up in front of me. Let me go back. So the way the amendment works with adopting this is that let's back up. So the new maps become effective in February. So prior to those new maps becoming effective, your community must adopt those new maps. There is a RSA in New Hampshire, which I had listed on a slide here. Let me back up. So I tell you the exact, there we go. Just give me 1 second. I'm just looking for that.
The slides aren't moving.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, yeah, sorry. I was trying to move the little, like what's that called? The little bar at the bottom. So I wasn't like giving everybody whiplash with going through each of them really quick. Yeah. So New Hampshire RSA 67457 allows communities to adopt that new map date, just the map date. You can't make any other changes in your floodplain regulations. You know, you can't make any definition changes. You can't make any other types of organizational changes, just that date of those flood insurance rate maps and flood insurance study, right? So that can be done by a resolution by your local governing body. For most communities, that's select board, that may be city council, town council, it just depends what that is in your community. So what they would do is they would hold that, they would create that resolution, they would all sign that, and then you have adopted that new map date. Now, logistically, moving forward, what would happen is that we, as the state coordinating office of the NFIP in New Hampshire, we are required to submit all communities that are receiving new maps. We are required to submit the most up-to-date copy of your floodplain regulations, including that new map date, to FEMA so that they can check that off as compliant before those new maps go effective. So I know in the guidance that our office has sent out to each community individually before was that once that resolution is completed, please provide a copy of that resolution and then a certified copy of your floodplain regulations, and then as well as a certified copy of your site plan subdivision regs, depending on if your community has either or both of those, to us so we can get that uploaded to FEMA prior to that February 8th, 2024 effective date so that it can be marked as complete. Does that answer? Let's see. Sorry, I'm going to go back to my chat.
Donna, I did unmute. I did allow you to unmute yourself. So instead of typing, you can just ask questions.
I would say if you have questions about that amendment process and adopting those flood maps, if you're a member of the New Hampshire Municipal Association, I'd highly recommend reaching out to them. They have fantastic attorneys that are very familiar with this RSA, who can give you some more guidance as well about it. You can always reach out to your town council as well, to get that information. Highly recommend speaking to either of those as well.
Oh, Donna doesn't have a microphone, so. Do we have to include the firm panel numbers in the amendment?
So technically, no. I think the idea of including the firm panel numbers is it just makes it very clear which panels are that your floodplain management regulations are enforcing, meaning where those areas are. The big thing to include is updating those dates. And depending on your community, you might be, if your community was fully within this watershed project and fully receiving new maps, then you only have one date to adopt. But depending, if only part of your community was in this watershed, you might have two dates. You might have the previous date because some of your community is still using the 2008 maps and some of your community is using the new 2024 maps. So a good way to verify this as well is on FEMA's Map Service Center, to download that flood insurance study report under the pending section, because there's actually a list that lists all the firm panels for each community as well. And I can show you that on demo. We'll see if there's any other questions first before I jump off to that. But if you want to stay on for just a second, Donna, after we kind of finish up other questions, I can show you how to go through and download that if that's helpful. Oh, thanks, Nick. Thanks for joining. Okay. I don't see any other questions. I mean, everybody else is welcome. So I'm going to share my other screen now just to show you again how to download that. So again, on the FEMA Map Service Center, you would do the same thing where you would kind of go over here to search all products, New Hampshire, Grafton County, and then you would choose whatever community you were from. You would click search. Don't make my mistake, click search. You would go to pending products. You would click the FIS report, and then you would download. It's broken up into 4 volumes. So typically you want the first one because that's where kind of all of that, the introductory data is. You can download and save this, or we'll open it in a new browser window, as this is. So this is the new flood insurance study for Grafton County. There's a lot of good information in here. As you go through here, so table 1, listing of NFIP jurisdictions. So you can see exactly which panels are within your community. Again, you can see which panels, depending on whatever community you're from, it lists all the panels here. Typically, a good rule of thumb, you would have to confirm, but this is just kind of a best practice. Again, a rule of thumb to go by is if there's an E at the end, that suffix E, that means it's from the 2008 maps. And if there's a suffix F, that's the new 2024 maps. But again, that is just a rule of thumb to go by. If you go down to the firm map index, which is a couple slides further down, excuse me if anybody's getting like whiplash from me scrolling through this super quick. So right here, there's a few pages you can look in your community and see which panels overlay your community. And then you go to the next page, you get the other part of the county. So you kind of just have to figure out where your community is within the county on here. I believe there's one more. Yep. So like you could see, for example, let's pick one that I know is in the mapping area. Oh, too far. We'll go over here because I know it's a side. So like the like town of Franconia, you know, anything that the panel covers your town boundary, that would be a map panel that you would need to adopt for your community. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to put that in the chat if you have further questions. Oh, good, Donna's typing, so. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Again, and Dawn, I highly recommend if you're a member of the New Hampshire Municipal Association, calling any of their attorneys there that you work with. They are a great resource and they know a lot about this map adoption and they can walk you through that RSA and how that should be done. Again, your legal counsel can do the same thing, but sometimes I know NHMA, it's easier to just call and ask them versus having to schedule sometimes an appointment with your legal counsel and whatnot, but both are great resources to get more information. Okay, are there any other questions?
I don't see any.
Yeah, we'll just give it another minute to see if anybody else asks anything. Okay, I'm not seeing any typing. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So again, thank you all for being here. If you have further questions as this process moves along, please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm happy to help further. So thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Have a good week. Happy holidays.